Hi, I'm Nate, and you're watching Photolearningism. I wanted to look into the concepts of noise, particularly ambient noise, because that's something we haven't touched on before. We did a lot of work with graphics and illustration and video, and not really touched on audio very much, so let's do that today. So once again, I'm Nate. This is Photolearningism. Thank you so much for joining in for another video. I do a lot of work on this channel to build a community of learning so that you can know about the different art technologies that are out there and how to make good use of them, and you can know about them. So I'm really thrilled that you're here and you're joining in to see this topic video, particularly about audio, about ambient noise. Some of this can be mitigated if you're into content creation or just general recording by using different kinds of microphones. Condenser mics are really good with keeping the range of recording within a certain field such that you don't catch a lot of the other ambient that's going on around the house. For example, I have children running around the other end of the house. It's amazing that you can't hear that right now very much. But there are ways to deal with it if it ends up in your recording. So a common way you may be familiar with is using equalization, because sound works on different frequency wavelengths, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But there's also other ways that are actually built a little bit on pattern recognition, which is where this gets really cool. So let's look at this now. So right now I am looking at Kdenlive. This is a non-linear video editor. We've looked at this many times before, and today I'm looking at it in context of just the audio, just so you can kind of see what comes baked into a really well-built video tool versus an audio-specific tool, because there are some distinctions there. Now, in this tool, there actually is a good reach of the audio wavelengths. I'm going to see if I can drag this over just a bit so you can see it better, but there is a filter in there in the audio workspace. There we go. A little bit more there. That is called Super EQ, I believe. Super Equalizer. And that is this. It can be a little confusing because you have to mouse over to see, but it actually shows you, as I mouse over, what the wavelength is. It starts at about, was it 65 hertz, which is a really low frequency, and then you get all the way up to the 20,000 hertz, which is really high. So those cover the different frequencies in between. You have the ability to adjust kind of left and right and make adjustments within those frequency wavelengths. That's good, although you may need to get, for example, lower than 65 hertz. There are some very deep bass frequencies out there that can occur, just naturally or otherwise. And to get that, at least in Kdenlive, what you have to do is use a bass audio filter here to kind of dip, and you can actually set the frequency here to cover that range. That, it can work, but I see some problems with that because then you're layering equalization processing filters, and that can go sideways very, very easily. So a different approach to look at this would be to export the audio and use a tool like Audacity. Now, you may have heard this plug way in the past, and that's because it's been around a long time, all right? However, it is still developed. There is still some new effort going on to keep this tool current, and I would recommend checking it out if you're looking into the audio-specific things. Just to give you an idea of where to start with this, we looked at the EQ right out of Kdenlive. I'm going to look at this right now and just say I want to see this purely for equalization. I'm going to select. Okay. So this is good, yes. You can see how we have 20 hertz all the way up to 20 kilohertz. That covers the same range heading into the higher frequencies, but we get all the way down to 20 hertz right out of the gate with this system. We don't have to multi-layer EQ effects or passes to achieve that. So that's one thing already that we can work with. And also, this is a lot more clear to understand that we're adjusting volume levels within that frequency. It's a little different than working on the sideways method as presented in other tools. So there's that. I'm going to play this clip, which I made. This is me just snapping my fingers, so here we go. And if you're listening carefully, there is a lot of gray noise going on in the background. And honestly, we're not really aware of all the different kinds of ambient noise going on because we're just very used to it. We have parts of our brain that actually build benchmarks of how we process information, and as we navigate life, certain things just become the baseline norm. It happens for people who live in the city where there's a bit more noise. It happens for people who live more in the urban or country areas where they're used to a certain ambient audio level. And there are still things going on in the background. The wind blows, cars drive by, but you're kind of immune to it and indifferent to it because you're just used to it being there. So when you record, though, it becomes painfully obvious because it's not super quiet in the background. You get that kind of hum, and other kind of wispy things happening there. So to deal with that, there's a couple different ways. You can do it with equalization because we were just touching on the different wavelengths and frequencies. And particularly in Audacity here, we could look at it purely from a frequency standpoint. If I flip this down over here from waveform into spectrogram, this gives me a different view of what happens. What this insinuates is that it's doing color to capture the waveform. That's not so important. You can still see it. The thing to pay attention to here is, again, the range of frequency. We now can see low bass all the way up to high treble here. And that gives us a really good idea, particularly if we want to try to EQ certain kinds of noise out. If noise happens to be on a fixed frequency, like a lot of the noise I'm looking at here is in the 2K range and below, 2000 hertz and below, we can crack open an equalizer here, and I want to go with, I believe it's this one. Let's try the filter curve. Yes, filter curve EQ. The difference here is that instead of the individual channels, this is kind of like a photo curve tool, but it's for audio, where I can grab a range of things all in the same without having to do the individual frequencies by themselves. So we, again, are looking at the lower end of the spectrum. We know that it's more in the bassy end of things that we're looking to get rid of. My snapping is what I want to save, and that's in the very high frequencies. So we want to keep everything from about 2K. I'm just going to click and make a dot, and make another dot here, and I'm just going to drag all this stuff off. And you see how that got clipped out. Hear the difference? Let me revert it. Here the hum is back. So you can deal with that frequency if it happens to be different from what you're trying to preserve. But let's say the noise you're trying to get rid of is in similar frequency wavelengths as what you want to keep. Then what do you do? Well, ideally, I'd say if you're running into that situation, you should probably look at an isolation chamber, but what if it's something you can't replace? So again, this tool Audacity has a very unique feature called noise removal, where you can build something called a noise profile, and it will analyze the pattern, the frequencies of noise, and actually intelligently sweep through and get that. I'll show you how it works. So for this, we don't need to keep on spectrogram. I'm going to just flip back to waveform because that's just fine. And I'm going to grab this section of noise here. Okay, it's just ambient hum noise. Okay, I'm going to go into my effects, and I'm going to pick on noise reduction. Now it's good to have your noise profile selected first, because as I go into this, I'm just going to click Get Noise Profile, which is what I've selected, and that's good to go. And then from here, I'm going to hit Control-A, but I'm selecting everything else because I want this noise profile to carry throughout the entire clip here. I'm going to go in again, back to noise reduction. I've already got the noise profile. I could make some adjustments here about how much I want to apply it, more or less. I'm going to keep it where it is. You have to play with the sensitivity a little bit, again, to see not just how many decibels, how loud or quiet it is, but the sensitivity to what you're applying it to. You have a little bit of control there. You can smooth it, again, with the frequencies about how drastic it's going to apply that. I'm going to keep it where it is and click OK. And you notice the waveform changed because it was recognizing that pattern. It's pretty cool, right? Now, it will have the effect whether you do this by EQ or by noise profile. Noise profile is a little more friendly, that you will probably have to add some frequency balance back. So after the fact, be prepared when you do this that you will need to go back in. You will need to add some kind of equalization back into the mix. All right, just to kind of add that undergirth bass if you're removing bass, or high frequency if you're taking that away, just so it doesn't sound flat. But again, these are two techniques of dealing with ambient noise that can get you really far, can get rid of a lot of unwanted noise in the background. And this was simple. I just removed noise from this clip in about 30 seconds. That was really easy. Even doing the EQ method is not so bad as long as you know what to look for when you flip the views and see the frequency comparison. So I do hope that's helpful and gives you some insight. One final note on this is that this was just exciting and good to note. We've been talking in videos about FFmpeg, which has a lot of exciting things. Audacity actually integrates with FFmpeg, and it really uses that for its file conversion capabilities. So there's a lot of flexibility in this tool when you go to export about how you're going to do that and the different kinds of quality and all those things. It's a very, very powerful tool. I am like barely scratching the surface on the capabilities of this thing. It doesn't really do it justice. I'm focusing purely on this concept of just noise, ambient noise, but definitely check it out and play with it if you're into audio and you want to work with that a bit, especially if you're a musician. This is just a super fantastic tool. It works on a timeline basis where you can actually multi-layer different tracks, and you can work with them and do all kinds of really interesting things to organize them and build complex sounds. So definitely check it out. So I hope this was fun for you. It was fun for me. Yeah, thank you so much for joining in. If it resonated with you to see this content and see the audio, particularly pieces of this, please give me a thumbs up. Consider subscribing and joining in for the exciting things that will come up in the future. And leave a comment, join the conversation, and not just for me, but for the learning community, just so we can help each other grow and become more aware of the fantastic technologies that are available for you. If I haven't said it before, this is open source Audacity. It is free. It is free, so it's worth trying. All right, thank you so much. I'll see you at the next video. And check out some videos. Check them out. Check them out.